She cared for a gardener, unaware the billionaire behind the dirt would fix her heart. The acceptance letter fell from her trembling hands. Naomi Baptiste stood in the cramped kitchen of her mother's house in Charleston, staring at the paper on the worn linoleum floor like it might bite her. Full scholarship. Master's program in landscape architecture. Everything she'd worked toward for 3 years. Everything that would finally pull her family out of the cycle they'd been trapped in since her father died, and she couldn't take it. "Ma." Her voice cracked. "You still awake?" The silence from the back bedroom told her everything. Her mother had fallen asleep sitting up again, too exhausted from dialysis to even make it under the covers. Naomi picked up the letter, folded it carefully, and tucked it into the drawer where dreams went to die. Right next to the eviction notice. The medical bills. The past due utilities. She was 34 years old, and she was drowning. Outside, Charleston's historic district glowed in the late spring twilight. All those beautiful homes with their perfect gardens and their people who'd never had to choose between their future and their mother's life. She pressed her forehead against the cool window glass and let herself feel it. The exhaustion, the rage, the suffocating weight of being the only thing standing between her mother and complete disaster. Her phone buzzed. Another text from the nursing program asking if she'd accept the position as a home health aide. Overnight shifts. Better pay than her current 3 jobs combined. The night her mother needed her most, she'd be across town keeping someone else's parent alive. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered to the empty kitchen. "I know you wanted better for us." She didn't cry. Crying was a luxury, and Naomi Baptiste hadn't been able to afford luxuries in 4 years. Before we continue with Naomi's story, if you're new here, welcome. Hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I love hearing from you all around the world. And to my returning viewers, thank you so much for coming back. Your support means everything. Now, let's get back to this story that's about to change everything. The estate on Laguerre Street was the kind of place Naomi usually only saw from the outside. 3 stories of pristine white columns, wraparound porches, gardens that belonged in magazines. She'd walked past it 100 times on her way to clean houses in the historic district, always wondering what kind of person lived behind those iron gates. Now she was standing at the service entrance, her work bag over her shoulder, trying not to feel like an imposter. The agency had been clear: temporary position, 2 weeks maximum, caring for the elderly owner of the property while the family searched for permanent help. The pay was almost obscene. Enough to cover 3 months of her mother's medications. Enough to buy time. Enough to make her ignore the voice in her head that said nothing this good ever came without a price. She rang the bell. The man who answered the door wasn't what she expected. Mid-30s, tall, with dark hair that needed a cut and dirt smudged across his white t-shirt. He had green eyes that looked too tired for someone his age, and hands that were rough with calluses. A gardener, clearly. She'd seen enough of them in this neighborhood to recognize the type. "You're early," he said, glancing at his watch. "Mrs. Chen isn't here yet to let you in." "I can wait," Naomi said, already stepping back. She'd learned not to make white people uncomfortable by existing in their spaces. "No, it's fine. Come in." He held the door wider, and she caught the scent of fresh earth and something else, expensive cologne that didn't match the dirt under his fingernails. "I'm just finishing up the garden beds out back. Mrs. Reynolds likes her roses a particular way." Mrs. Reynolds. The elderly woman Naomi would be caring for. She followed him through a kitchen that belonged in a design magazine. Marble countertops, professional-grade appliances, windows that overlooked gardens so beautiful they made her chest ache. This was the life her landscape architecture degree would have given her access to. Not as a visitor. As a creator. "She's resting upstairs," the gardener said, grabbing a water bottle from the refrigerator like he owned the place. Maybe he did, in a way. Good help was hard to find in Charleston, and a gardener who could maintain grounds like these probably had free rein. "Fair warning, she's sharp as a tack and doesn't suffer fools. You seem capable, though." "Thanks," Naomi said, though she wasn't sure if it was a compliment or an assessment. He studied her for a moment, and something in his gaze made her pulse quicken. Not threatening. Just seeing her. Really seeing her, in a way that felt both uncomfortable and oddly thrilling. "You know plants?" he asked suddenly. "Some. Studied landscape architecture before," she caught herself. "Before life happened. Before choices had to be made. Before I went into caregiving." His eyebrows rose. "Landscape architecture. That's impressive." "It's impractical," she corrected, surprised at her own bitterness. She usually kept that locked down tight. "Or it's a dream deferred," he said quietly. "Those aren't the same thing." Before she could respond, footsteps sounded on the stairs. A tiny woman with snow-white hair and eyes like a hawk appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily on a cane but radiating the kind of authority that had nothing to do with physical strength. "Sullivan," she said to the gardener, "stop monopolizing my new aide. And take off those filthy boots before your mother sees you've been tracking dirt through her kitchen again." His mother. Naomi's brain scrambled to recalibrate. The gardener, Sullivan, grinned like he'd been caught doing something far worse than tracking dirt. "Yes, grandmother," he said, and there was such warmth in his voice that Naomi felt something twist in her chest. "I'll leave you ladies to it." He paused next to Naomi on his way out, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him, smell the earth and sunshine caught in his clothes. "Welcome to the madhouse, Naomi Baptiste," he said softly, and she realized with a start that he'd read her name from the badge clipped to her bag. "Something tells me you're exactly what this family needs." Then he was gone, and she was left standing in that beautiful kitchen with a woman who looked like she could read minds and a feeling in her gut that her carefully controlled life was about to get very, very complicated. "Well," Mrs. Reynolds said, her sharp eyes missing nothing, "that grandson of mine has never looked at anyone quite like that before. This should be interesting." Naomi wanted to protest. To say she was here to work, nothing more. That she didn't have time or space in her life for complications, especially not involving rich white men who played at being gardeners while living in mansions. But Mrs. Reynolds was already heading toward the stairs, and Naomi had rent to pay and medications to buy and a mother who needed her, so she followed, and tried to ignore the way her hands were shaking, tried to pretend she hadn't felt it too, that spark of recognition when their eyes met, like her soul had whispered, "Him. It's him." And most of all, tried not to think about what it meant that the first time in 4 years she'd felt anything other than exhausted, it was for a man she couldn't have in a life she couldn't afford to complicate. The evening shift was supposed to be simple. Make sure Mrs. Reynolds took her medications, help her with dinner, keep her company. The agency had warned Naomi that the elderly woman was particular, demanding, and had driven off 3 aides in the past month alone. What they hadn't mentioned was that she was also wickedly funny, sharp as broken glass, and seemed determined to excavate every detail of Naomi's life within the first 2 hours. "So your mother has kidney disease," Mrs. Reynolds said, not even pretending to be subtle as they sat in the sunroom overlooking those magnificent gardens. "Stage 4. Stage 3, Naomi corrected carefully, wondering how this woman had extracted more information from her in one evening than most people learned in months. "But progressing. And you're working 3 jobs to cover her care." It wasn't a question. "For now," Naomi said, gesturing around them. "If you'll have me." "Oh, I'll have you." Mrs. Reynolds's eyes gleamed with something that looked almost like mischief. "You're the first aide who hasn't treated me like I'm senile or breakable. And you actually know the difference between a David Austin rose and a knockout rose, which is more than I can say for most people." Despite herself, Naomi smiled. "My daddy loved roses. We had a tiny yard in North Charleston, but he made it beautiful. He taught me every name, every care requirement." Her throat tightened. "He died 4 years ago. Heart attack. Same week my mom's kidneys started failing." "And you gave up landscape architecture to care for her." "I postponed it," Naomi said automatically, though they both knew it was a lie. Some postponements became permanent. Some dreams expired quietly while you weren't looking. Mrs. Reynolds was quiet for a long moment, watching the last light fade from the garden. "My grandson is out there," she said finally, "working on the beds by the fountain. He does that when he can't sleep. when the weight of what he's carrying gets too heavy to bear indoors. Naomi's pulse quickened at the mention of Sullivan, though she tried to keep her face neutral. He seems dedicated to the gardens. He's dedicated to escape, Mrs. Reynolds corrected gently. That boy has been running from himself for 3 years, ever since his wife died. Works himself into the ground, literally, rather than deal with the grief. His mother worries. His father worries. And I worry, because he's forgotten that he's allowed to live, not just exist. The words hit too close to home. Why are you telling me this? Naomi asked quietly. Because when he looked at you this afternoon, I saw something I haven't seen in 3 years. Mrs. Reynolds reached over and patted Naomi's hand with her papery soft fingers. I saw him see someone. Not just look at them. Actually see them. And you saw him too, didn't you? Naomi wanted to deny it. Should have denied it. She was here to work, to earn money, to survive. Not to get tangled up in some rich family's dynamics or their grief-stricken grandson who played in the dirt like it could save him. But something about Mrs. Reynolds made lying impossible. I can't afford to see anyone, she said instead. I have responsibilities. My mother depends on me. And who do you depend on? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Nobody, Naomi wanted to say. That was the answer. She'd learned the hard way that depending on people only led to disappointment. Her ex-boyfriend had left the second her mother got sick and money got tight. Her friends had slowly drifted away when she couldn't go out anymore, couldn't afford dinners or drinks or the luxury of pretending life was anything other than survival. She depended on herself. Period. I should check your vitals, she said instead, reaching for the blood pressure cuff. Mrs. Reynolds laughed, a sound like wind chimes. Deflection. I like you even more now. She held out her arm obligingly. But mark my words, Naomi Baptiste. That grandson of mine is going to fall in love with you, and you're going to have to decide if you're brave enough to let him. Mrs. Reynolds, call me Eleanor. And before you tell me all the reasons it won't work, remember this. The old woman's eyes were suddenly fierce. Sullivan doesn't know you're the aide. He thinks you're here visiting me. And I have no intention of telling him otherwise until you decide what you want. Naomi's hands stilled on the blood pressure cuff. Why would you do that? Because my grandson needs to fall in love with a woman, not a situation. He needs to see you as Naomi first, brilliant, beautiful, exhausted Naomi who knows roses and gave up her dreams for love. Not as the hired help he'd feel obligated to keep at arm's length. Eleanor's smile was pure mischief now. Consider it an experiment. 2 weeks. See what happens when 2 people meet without all the usual barriers and expectations. That's manipulation, Naomi said, but her heart was racing. That's giving fate a gentle push, Eleanor corrected. The question is, are you brave enough to accept the gift? Through the windows, Naomi could see a figure moving in the garden, barely visible in the twilight. Sullivan, still working, still running from whatever haunted him in that big empty house. She thought about the acceptance letter folded in her drawer. The dreams she'd buried. The way her chest had tightened when he'd looked at her like she was someone worth seeing. I'm not brave, she whispered. You're terrified, Eleanor agreed. Which means you're exactly brave enough. Cowards don't scare themselves. Only the courageous do. And somehow, impossibly, Naomi found herself nodding. Found herself agreeing to a deception that could only end badly. Found herself thinking that maybe, just maybe, she deserved 2 weeks of being seen as Naomi first and all her complications second. Even if it was a lie. Even if it would hurt when it ended. Even if she was setting herself up for the kind of heartbreak she'd promised herself she'd never risk again. Outside, Sullivan straightened from his work and looked toward the house. For just a moment, their eyes met through the glass, and Naomi felt something shift in her chest, something that felt dangerously like hope. The roses were blooming early this year. Sullivan Reynolds stood knee-deep in the south garden bed, pruning shears in hand, watching the sunrise paint Charleston's skyline in shades of gold and pink. He'd been out here since 4 a.m., when sleep became impossible and the walls of his bedroom felt like they were closing in. 3 years since Claire died, and the insomnia still hit him in waves. Work helped. Dirt under his fingernails, the physical ache of muscle and bone, the simple. Family looked at him like he was a bomb that might detonate at any moment. Out here, he could just be Sullivan the gardener. Not Sullivan Reynolds, heir to the Reynolds development fortune. Not the widower who'd survived the car crash that killed his wife. Not the man who'd walked away from his father's company 3 years ago and hadn't set foot in a boardroom since. Just a man and his roses. You're going to prune those poor things into oblivion. He turned to find Naomi standing at the edge of the garden, 2 coffee mugs in her hands and that look on her face. The one that said she saw through his nonsense without even trying. She'd been coming to visit his grandmother for 3 days now, and each day Sullivan found himself inventing reasons to be outside when she arrived. To catch glimpses of her through the kitchen windows. To manufacture excuses to be in the same room. He was 38 years old, and he felt like a teenager with his first crush. It was terrifying. Early riser, he said, accepting the coffee she offered. Their fingers brushed, and that spark shot through him again, the one he'd been trying to ignore since she walked into his grandmother's kitchen and made him feel something other than numb for the first time in 3 years. Couldn't sleep, she admitted, settling onto the garden bench his grandfather had built 50 years ago. Your grandmother snores. Nobody warned me about that. Sullivan laughed, really laughed, and it felt rusty. Foreign. She claims it's dignified breathing. We've learned not to argue. Smart man. Naomi sipped her coffee, watching him with those dark eyes that seemed to see everything he tried to hide. You're out here every morning. I've noticed. The gardens don't tend themselves. Sullivan. The way she said his name made his chest tighten. Gentle but firm, like she knew he was lying and wasn't going to let him get away with it. The gardens are immaculate. You could take a week off and they'd be fine. So what are you really doing out here at dawn? He should deflect. Should make a joke or change the subject or do what he'd been doing for 3 years. Anything to avoid talking about the grief that lived in his bones like an infection he couldn't shake. But something about Naomi Baptiste made him want to tell the truth. Outrunning ghosts, he said quietly. Turns out they're faster than they look. She didn't offer platitudes. Didn't tell him it would get easier, or that time healed all wounds, or any of the other useless phrases people had thrown at him like life preservers that sank. She just sat there, present and solid, and let the silence be what it was. My wife Claire died 3 years ago, he heard himself say. Car accident on the Ravenel Bridge. Drunk driver crossed the median. I was driving. I walked away with a concussion and a broken collarbone. She didn't walk away at all. Naomi's hand found his. Warm. Real. Alive. I stopped working, Sullivan continued, the words tumbling out now like water through a broken dam. Stopped caring about the company my father built, the legacy I was supposed to carry forward. My parents were terrified I'd disappear completely. So I came here, to my grandmother's house, and I started digging in the dirt. And somehow the roses were easier to face than people. Because the roses don't expect you to be okay, Naomi said softly. Because the roses don't need me to be anything other than present. He looked down at their joined hands, his dirt-stained and calloused, hers smaller and strong. Until you showed up 3 days ago and made me remember what it felt like to want to be present for a person instead of just plants. Her breath caught. Sullivan. I know it's too soon. I know I'm a mess. I know you probably came here to visit my grandmother, not to have some grief-stricken stranger dump his trauma on you at sunrise. He forced himself to meet her eyes. But I can't stop thinking about you, Naomi. Can't stop finding excuses to be where you are. Can't stop feeling like maybe, possibly, I might want to learn how to be alive again instead of just surviving. The sun had risen fully now, bathing the garden in clear morning light. Naomi's face was beautiful in it, cheekbones catching the gold, eyes deep and careful and holding something that looked like hope mixed with fear. I'm not who you think I am, she said finally, and there was pain in her voice. You're someone who gave up her dreams to take care of her mother, Sullivan said. Someone who knows roses and landscape architecture and works herself to exhaustion because she loves fiercely and completely. Someone who's been surviving too, just like me. Someone who looked at me 3 days ago and made me feel seen for the first time since Claire died. He squeezed her hand gently. That's who I think you are. Am I wrong? Tears slipped down her cheeks. No. You're not wrong. Then maybe we could try something. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. Maybe we could try being two broken people who see each other. No expectations. No pressure. Just honesty. And coffee in the garden. And seeing what happens when we stop running long enough to be present. I don't know how to do that, she whispered. I've been running for 4 years. Me too. Maybe we could learn together. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then she smiled, small and scared and real. Okay, she said. Coffee in the garden. Honesty. Being present. We can try. And when Sullivan kissed her forehead, gentle as a promise, he felt something in his chest crack open. Something that had been frozen solid for 3 years. Something that felt dangerously like hope. Inside the house, Eleanor Reynolds watched from the sunroom window and allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Phase 1 complete. By day 5, Naomi knew she was in trouble. Real trouble. The kind that couldn't be solved with extra shifts or careful budgeting or pretending her feelings didn't exist. She was falling for Sullivan Reynolds. Falling hard and fast and completely, despite every logical reason why she shouldn't. Despite the deception she was participating in. Despite the fact that he still didn't know she was the hired help. Despite the reality that in 9 more days, her temporary position would end and she'd go back to her real life, the one with 4 jobs and medical bills and no space for billionaire heirs who made her heart race. But logic didn't stop the way her pulse jumped when she heard his voice in the hallway. Didn't prevent the butterflies when he found reasons to brush past her in the kitchen. Couldn't kill the warmth that bloomed in her chest every evening when they sat in the garden together, talking until the stars came out. He told her about Claire, about their college romance, the wedding on Folly Beach, the plans they'd made for children and a life that would never happen. About the guilt that ate at him, the survivor's shame, the way he'd lost himself in work until work lost all meaning. She told him about her father, the way he'd sung while gardening, his big laugh, how the light had gone out of her mother's eyes when he died. About the ex-boyfriend who'd promised forever until forever got expensive. About the scholarship letter and the dreams she'd folded away like origami cranes she'd never set free. They traded wounds like gifts, careful and reverent, and every conversation made the deception harder to bear. You should take the scholarship, Sullivan said on day 6, while helping her weed the herb garden Eleanor insisted on maintaining. Master's program, full ride, that's incredible, Naomi. I can't, she said automatically, her hands stilling in the dirt. My ma needs me. Your ma needs you healthy and whole, not worked to death. He sat back on his heels, genuine concern in those green eyes. There has to be a way. Help for her care, a payment plan for the medical bills. I'm handling it, Naomi said sharply, then immediately regretted her tone. Sullivan just watched her, patient as stone. You know what I've learned these past 3 years? What? Handling everything alone is just a slow way of drowning. He reached over and tucked a curl behind her ear, the gesture so intimate it made her breath catch. Let me help. Not because you need rescuing, but because people who care about each other share burdens. That's what makes them bearable. People who care about each other. Her heart was going to beat right out of her chest. Why? She asked quietly. Why do you care, Sullivan? You barely know me. I know enough. His thumb traced her jawline, and she forgot how to breathe. I know you're brilliant and exhausted and stronger than you should have to be. I know you light up when you talk about landscape design. I know you love your mother fiercely. I know you haven't let yourself hope for anything in so long that it scares you when someone offers it. He leaned closer. And I know that when I'm with you, I remember what it feels like to want a future instead of just enduring the present. Sullivan, I'm falling in love with you, Naomi Baptiste. The words hung in the air between them like a vow. I know it's fast. I know it's probably crazy. But I'm 38 years old and I've already lost one love to waiting too long to say what mattered. So I'm saying it now. I'm falling in love with you, and I think you might be falling too. She was. God help her, she was. But he didn't know the truth. Didn't know she was the aide, hired to care for his grandmother, paid to be here. Didn't know that everything between them was built on Eleanor's well-intentioned deception. There's something I need to tell you, she started, her stomach churning. Tell me you feel it too, he interrupted, his voice rough with emotion. That's all I need to know right now. The rest we can figure out. And Naomi, exhausted, terrified, in love despite every reason not to be, made a choice. I feel it too, she whispered. Then Sullivan was kissing her, right there in the herb garden with dirt on their hands and the Charleston sun warm on their skin. Kissing her like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. Like she was real and solid and worth the risk of hoping again. And for those few perfect minutes, Naomi let herself believe it could be this simple. Let herself forget the complications waiting just around the corner. Let herself be just a woman kissing a man in a garden, both of them brave enough to try again. The truth could wait one more day. Just one more day. Day 9 arrived with rain. Not the gentle Charleston rain that misted the gardens and made everything smell like magnolias. The angry kin that pounded against windows and flooded the streets and made Naomi's mother's house leak in 3 new places she couldn't afford to fix. Naomi stood in Eleanor's kitchen at 6 a.m., phone pressed to her ear, listening to her mother try to convince her that everything was fine while water dripped into pots in the background. Ma, I can hear it, Naomi said, rubbing her temples. Just tell me how bad it is. Nothing that can't wait, baby. You focus on your work. Mom, I said I'm fine, Naomi. Her mother's voice had that edge to it, the one that meant she was in pain but would die before admitting it. The dialysis went well yesterday. Mrs. Patterson from church brought over dinner. I'm managing just fine. Managing. That word that meant surviving, barely, by fingernails and prayer. I can come home, Naomi offered, knowing before she said it what the answer would be. You have 6 more days of good pay left. You stay put. We'll handle this. We. Like her mother had anyone else. Like they were a team instead of one exhausted daughter trying to hold together a life that kept cracking apart. When she hung up, Sullivan was standing in the doorway, hair damp from his own morning run, concern written across his face. Everything okay? No. Nothing was okay. Her mother's house was flooding. The medical bills were piling up despite Naomi working 4 jobs. The scholarship deadline had passed 2 days ago, another door closed, another dream deferred into oblivion. And she was standing in a kitchen that cost more than her mother's house, falling in love with a man who didn't even know her real name was on a caregiver's contract in his grandmother's study. Fine, she lied, the word bitter on her tongue. Sullivan crossed to her, and God, the way he looked at her, like she was fragile and precious and worth protecting. It made her want to scream and sob and tell him everything all at once. Naomi. He tilted her chin up gently. Talk to me. My mom's house is flooding. The roof has 3 new leaks. She won't let me come help because she knows I need this. She caught herself, heart racing. This time with your grandmother. Not a complete lie. Just not the complete truth either. How much? Sullivan asked immediately. What? How much to fix the roof? The leaks. His hand was warm against her face, his eyes sincere. Let me help, please. I have more money than I'll ever need, and you. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. I can't take your money, Sullivan. Why not? People who love each other help each other, remember? That's what I told you. Because it's not that simple. She stepped back, her chest tight. You don't understand. So help me understand. He followed her retreat, patient and steady. Explain to me why accepting help from someone who loves you is somehow wrong. Because I'm not. She stopped herself before the truth spilled out. Because I'm not a guest here. Because I'm the hired help. Because everything between us is built on a lie your grandmother orchestrated and I've been too cowardly to correct. Because you're not what? Sullivan asked gently. Before she could answer, Eleanor appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily on her cane. For once, the old woman's face wasn't mischievous. It was serious. Because she's been lying to you, darling, Eleanor said quietly. We both have. The world tilted. Naomi's stomach dropped to the floor. Sullivan's face went carefully blank, the expression of a man who'd learned to guard his reactions. Grandmother, he said slowly, what are you talking about? Eleanor sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 87 years. Naomi isn't here visiting me, Sullivan. She's my health aide. Has been for the past 9 days. I hired her through the agency, and I deliberately didn't tell you because I wanted you to meet her as a person first, not an employee. The silence was deafening. Sullivan's eyes found Naomi's, and the betrayal in them made her want to disappear. You're the aide. You've been the aide this whole time. It wasn't a question. Yes, Naomi whispered, tears already streaming down her face. I'm sorry. I tried to tell you multiple times, but what? His voice was dangerously quiet. But it was easier to let me fall in love with a lie? No. Sullivan, please, let me explain. Explain what? He was backing away from her now, and every step felt like a knife. Explain how you stood in my garden and let me pour my heart out to you while knowing you were being paid to be here? Explain how you kissed me, told me you felt it too, all while keeping this massive secret. I wanted to tell you. Naomi's voice cracked. Day 1, day 2, every single day I wanted to tell you, but your grandmother asked me not to, and then we got close and I was scared, and I'm sorry, Sullivan, I'm so sorry. Everyone leaves, he said, and his voice was hollow now. Empty. Everyone lies or leaves or dies, and I was stupid enough to think you might be different. I am different. What we have is real. What we have is a paycheck and a deception. He looked at his grandmother, and there was such pain in his eyes that Naomi felt it like a physical blow. And you manipulated both of us. I gave you a chance to meet someone extraordinary without all your usual walls, Eleanor said firmly, though Naomi could see her hands shaking on her cane. And it worked. You fell in love with exactly who she is. The circumstances don't change that. The circumstances are everything. Sullivan's control finally cracked. I told her things I've never told anyone. I opened up, made myself vulnerable, let myself hope for the first time in 3 years, and the entire time it was based on a lie. How am I supposed to trust anything now? Because I love you, Naomi said desperately. That part was never a lie, Sullivan. I love you, and I don't care about your money or your name or any of it. I just care about you. You don't even know me. He was already heading for the door, grabbing his keys. The real me. The me who isn't some romantic garden fantasy but a screwed-up widower who can't sleep and can't move forward and clearly can't tell the difference between genuine connection and paid companionship. That's not fair, Eleanor said sharply. Fair. Sullivan laughed, bitter and broken. Nothing about this is fair, grandmother. I need to go. Sullivan, wait. Naomi reached for him, but he pulled away like her touch burned. My lawyer will handle your final payment, he said, not looking at her. Consider your position terminated immediately. I'll arrange for another aide for my grandmother. Then he was gone, the door slamming behind him with a finality that echoed through the empty house. Naomi stood frozen in the kitchen, her entire world crumbling around her. 9 days. She'd had 9 days of hope, of being seen, of believing she might deserve something beautiful. And now it was over, destroyed by the very deception she'd known would hurt him. I tried to warn you, Eleanor said softly, settling into a kitchen chair with visible effort. Told you that you'd have to decide if you were brave enough. Turns out neither of us was brave enough to tell him the truth when it mattered. What have I done? Naomi whispered. broken both your hearts trying to protect them. Eleanor looked older than Naomi had ever seen her. The question now is whether either of you are strong enough to fix it. Through the window, Naomi could see Sullivan's car tearing down the driveway, away from her, away from the garden where they'd shared coffee and confessions, away from the possibility of a future together. She'd come to Charleston looking for a paycheck. Instead, she'd found love and lost it in the space of 9 days. And the worst part, the part that would haunt her for the rest of her life, was that he was right. She'd lied. She'd let him fall in love with someone who wasn't being completely honest. She'd taken Eleanor's deception and made it her own because she'd been too afraid to risk losing him. Now she'd lost him anyway. And this time, there was no one to blame but herself. Sullivan hadn't set foot in the garden since he left. He'd returned to his penthouse downtown, the one he'd bought with Claire, the one he'd abandoned after she died because empty spaces had too many ghosts. Turned out, occupied spaces had them too. The living room still held furniture they'd picked out together. The kitchen still had her favorite coffee mugs. The closet still had her clothes because he'd never had the strength to pack them away. He'd run from this place into his grandmother's garden. Now he'd run from the garden back into this place. Apparently he was excellent at running in circles. "You look like hell," his father said from the doorway of Sullivan's home office, where Sullivan had been attempting to work for 3 hours and instead just stared at spreadsheets without seeing them. "Thanks, Dad. Really helpful." Thomas Reynolds crossed the room and settled into the chair across from the desk, the one reserved for business meetings Sullivan hadn't taken in 3 years. His father was 65, silver-haired, distinguished, and currently wearing the expression that meant he was about to say something Sullivan didn't want to hear. "Your grandmother called," Thomas said. "I'm not discussing this. She's worried about you. Says you won't return her calls. Because she manipulated me." Sullivan's voice was flat. "Because she lied by omission and orchestrated an entire relationship based on deception. So no, I'm not particularly interested in chatting." "Your grandmother loves you," Thomas said carefully. "Everything she did because she wanted you to live again instead of just existing. Maybe her methods were questionable, but her intentions don't." Sullivan's hands clenched. "Don't defend what she did. Don't tell me it was for my own good. And for God's sake, don't tell me I should forgive her because she's old and means well." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'm not defending her methods. I'm asking if you're willing to throw away genuine love because it started imperfectly. It started with a lie. It started with your grandmother giving you a chance to meet someone without all your usual defenses and barriers." His father leaned forward. "Son, I watched you fall apart when Claire died. Watched you disappear into grief so profound I wasn't sure we'd ever get you back. Then you came home 3 weeks ago, and for the first time in 3 years, you were alive. You smiled. You laughed. You talked about a future instead of just enduring the present." Thomas's voice softened. "That woman did that. Naomi did that. Does it really matter how you met?" "Yes," Sullivan said, but his voice cracked. "Because I trusted her. Because I made myself vulnerable after 3 years of keeping everyone at arm's length. Because I let myself believe." He couldn't finish. "That you could love again," Thomas finished gently. "That you deserved to be happy. That moving forward wasn't a betrayal of Claire." Sullivan's eyes burned. "I told Naomi things I never told anyone. And the entire time, she was being paid to be there." "Was she being paid to fall in love with you?" his father asked. "Because according to Eleanor, that woman is absolutely miserable. Quit all her other jobs to take care of her mother full-time. The roof is still leaking. The medical bills are piling up. And she's apparently drowning, Sullivan, just like you are. Except she's doing it alone because you threw her away the second things got complicated." "I didn't throw her away. She lied. She participated in a well-intentioned deception that your grandmother initiated, got caught between her job and her feelings, and made the mistake of thinking she could have both without hurting you." Thomas stood, preparing to leave. "Here's what I know about love, son. It's messy. It's imperfect. It starts in unexpected ways and it requires forgiveness and grace and the willingness to choose it every single day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. He paused at the door. Claire would want you to be happy. She'd want you to live. And I think she'd tell you that throwing away real love because it wasn't gift-wrapped perfectly is a coward's way out. After his father left, Sullivan sat in the silent office for a long time, thinking about Naomi's face when Eleanor revealed the truth, the devastation, the tears, the desperate apology. Thinking about the way she'd said, "I love you," like it was being ripped from her chest. Thinking about her working 4 jobs, giving up her dreams, drowning just like him. Thinking about whether he was brave enough to forgive an imperfect beginning or if he was going to let fear win again. Naomi's hands were shaking as she filled out the loan application. $20,000. That's what the roof would cost, plus emergency repairs to the foundation that the flooding had revealed, plus catch up on 3 months of past due bills. $20,000 she didn't have and couldn't borrow because her credit was destroyed and her income barely covered current expenses, let alone debt repayment. Miss Baptiste. She looked up to find the loan officer, a woman about her age with kind eyes and a sympathetic smile, standing in the doorway of the cubicle. "I'm sorry," the woman said, and Naomi knew before she continued what was coming. "Your application has been denied. With your current debt-to-income ratio and credit score, I understand." Naomi gathered her papers with hands that wouldn't quite cooperate. "Thank you for your time." Outside the bank, Charleston's summer heat hit her like a wall. Or maybe that was just the weight of hopelessness pressing down on her chest until she couldn't breathe. 3 weeks since Sullivan had walked out. 3 weeks since she'd lost her job at the Reynolds estate. 3 weeks of watching her mother's health decline while the house literally crumbled around them. The universe had a sick sense of humor. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother's dialysis center. "Missed appointment today. Please reschedule ASAP." Naomi closed her eyes and let the panic wash over her. Her mother had missed dialysis because Naomi hadn't been home to drive her, hadn't been there to make sure she went, hadn't been there at all because she'd been at this godforsaken bank begging for money they wouldn't give her. She was failing. At everything. All at once. "Naomi." The voice made her heart stop. She turned to find Sullivan standing 3 feet away, looking like he'd lost as much sleep as she had. His hair was longer, unstyled. His clothes were rumpled. And his eyes. God, his eyes looked haunted. "What are you doing here?" she managed. "I saw you go into the bank. I was." He gestured vaguely down the street. "Driving. Thinking. Being an idiot, mostly. Can we talk?" "I don't think that's a good idea." "Probably not." He stepped closer, and she could smell him. Earth and sunshine and that expensive cologne that didn't match his gardener hands. "But I need to say something, and I need you to listen. Can you do that? Please?" Against her better judgment, she nodded. "I was wrong," Sullivan said, and his voice was raw. "Not about being hurt. Not about feeling betrayed. Those feelings were valid. But I was wrong to throw away what we had because it started imperfectly. I was wrong to punish you for my grandmother's machinations. And I was wrong to walk away without listening, without fighting, without giving us a chance to figure it out together." Naomi's eyes filled with tears. She was too exhausted to fight. "Sullivan, I'm not done." He moved closer, tentative, like he was afraid she'd bolt. "I've spent 3 weeks being miserable. 3 weeks punishing myself by staying away from you. 3 weeks pretending I was protecting myself when really I was just being a coward. Because you're right, what we had was real. The feelings were real. The love was real. And I threw it away because I was too scared to forgive an imperfect beginning." "I lied to you," she whispered. "I let you believe something that wasn't true. You participated in a deception that my grandmother started, then got caught between your job and your feelings and made a human mistake." He was right in front of her now, close enough to touch. "And I made you pay for every person who'd ever hurt me instead of seeing you for who you actually are. Someone brave enough to fall in love despite having every reason not to." A sob escaped her throat. "I don't know how to do this, Sullivan. I don't know how to let someone help me or trust that it won't disappear or believe I deserve. You deserve everything, he interrupted fiercely. You deserve the scholarship you gave up. You deserve a mother who's healthy and a house that doesn't leak and a life where you get to dream instead of just survive. You deserve someone who fights for you instead of running away the second things get hard. And I want to be that person, Naomi. If you'll let me. If you can forgive me for being an absolute idiot. I was the one who. We both messed up, he said gently. You lied by omission. I judged without listening. We're both scared and scarred and trying to figure out how to trust again after life beat us down. But here's what I know. I love you. I loved you when I thought you were just visiting my grandmother. I loved you when I found out you were the aide. And I love you now, standing outside this bank where I'm guessing you just got denied a loan you desperately need because you're too stubborn to ask for help. He wasn't wrong. Let me in, Sullivan pleaded. Let me help. Not because you need rescuing, but because people who love each other share burdens. Remember. That's what makes them bearable. And Naomi, exhausted, scared, so tired of being strong alone, finally let herself break. The roof needs $20,000 in repairs, she sobbed. My mother missed dialysis today because I wasn't there. The scholarship deadline passed. I'm drowning, Sullivan, and I don't know how to stop. Then let me throw you a lifeline, he said, pulling her into his arms. Please, Naomi. Let me love you. Let me help. Let us figure this out together. She cried into his shirt, 3 weeks of fear and grief and love pouring out in the middle of a Charleston sidewalk. And Sullivan held her through it all, steady and solid and exactly what she needed. I love you, she finally whispered against his chest. I never stopped. Even when you left, even when I thought it was over, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped either, he said into her hair. I just forgot for a minute that love means fighting through the hard parts, not running from them. When she finally looked up at him, his face was wet with his own tears. We're a mess, she said with a watery laugh. We're perfect, he corrected, then kissed her forehead. Perfectly imperfect. Perfectly broken. Perfectly brave enough to try. And standing there in the Charleston heat with the bank behind them and all their wounds laid bare between them, Naomi finally let herself believe it. Let herself hope. Let herself accept the love she'd been convinced she didn't deserve. Okay, she whispered. Okay, let's try. Sullivan's smile could have lit up the entire city. Let's try, he echoed. And for the first time in 4 years, Naomi Baptiste felt like she might actually be able to breathe. The first thing Sullivan did was fix the roof. Not hire someone to fix it, actually fix it. Showed up at Naomi's mother's house in North Charleston wearing jeans and a tool belt, with a crew of contractors who treated him like he was one of them instead of a billionaire slumming it. Naomi stood in the yard, watching him work in the June heat, and felt something in her chest expand until she thought she might burst. Your man's got skills, her mother said from the porch, where she sat wrapped in the quilt Naomi's father had given her 20 years ago. Brenda Baptiste was 58 but looked older, the dialysis and grief aging her beyond her years. Still, her eyes were sharp, and right now they were watching Sullivan with the same assessment she'd once given Naomi's terrible ex-boyfriend. Except this time, approval shone there too. He's not my man, Ma, Naomi said automatically. Baby, that man has been here every day for a week. Fixed the roof, replaced the foundation supports, paid 3 months of backed-up bills, and still shows up to have coffee with you on this porch every morning before he goes to work. Brenda smiled. He's absolutely your man. Question is, when are you going to stop being scared and let yourself have him? Naomi didn't have an answer for that point. 7 days since the reconciliation outside the bank. 7 days of Sullivan showing up, helping, being present in ways that terrified her. Because accepting help meant admitting she couldn't do it alone. Meant trusting someone to stay. Meant opening herself up to the possibility of losing him all over again. I'm working on it, she said quietly. Work faster. Her mother's voice was gentle but firm. Life's too short to waste time on fear, baby. Your daddy taught me that. Before Naomi could respond, Sullivan climbed down from the ladder, sweat-soaked and grinning. He'd patched the last leak. The roof was finally, blessedly whole. All done, he announced, stripping off his work gloves. Mrs. Baptiste, your roof should be good for another 20 years at least. Call me Brenda, honey. And thank you. Her mother's eyes were wet. You didn't have to do all this. Yes, I did. Sullivan's gaze found Naomi's, intense and sure. The woman I love needed help. That made it my responsibility. My privilege. Brenda nodded slowly, then stood with visible effort. I'm going inside to rest. You two talk. When they were alone on the porch, Naomi finally let herself look at Sullivan, really look at him. At the man who'd spent a week working in the summer heat to fix her mother's house. Who'd paid bills without making her feel small. Who'd shown up every single day like he was trying to prove something. Why are you doing this? She asked quietly. Because I love you. He said it like it was the simplest thing in the world. Because you've been carrying everything alone for 4 years, and you don't have to anymore. Because when you love someone, you show up. You fight. You fix what's broken, even if it takes time. I don't know how to let people help me, Naomi admitted. I don't know how to trust that you won't leave when things get hard. Things are already hard. Sullivan moved closer, his hands finding hers. Your mom's sick. Money's tight. We're both dealing with grief and trauma and learning how to be together. And I'm still here. Still showing up. Still choosing you. What if it gets harder? Then we handle it together. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. Naomi, I'm not your ex. I'm not going to bail when things get expensive or complicated or difficult. I'm in this. All the way. For as long as you'll have me. The words were everything she needed to hear and everything she was terrified to believe. I want to take you somewhere, Sullivan said suddenly. Tonight. Will you let me? Where? Trust me. And somehow, impossibly, she found herself nodding. Sullivan drove them to Folly Beach as the sun started its descent. The same beach where he'd married Claire 7 years ago. The same sand where he'd promised forever to someone he'd lost too soon. Naomi knew this without asking, knew that bringing her here meant something profound. They walked along the shore in comfortable silence, shoes off, waves lapping at their feet. Naomi waited, letting him find his words. I got married here, Sullivan finally said, stopping to face the ocean. 7 years ago. Claire wore a simple white dress and flowers in her hair, and I thought I knew what forever looked like. He turned to Naomi, and his eyes were clear. I did know. We would have had that forever if she'd lived. But she didn't, and I've spent 3 years feeling guilty for surviving. Guilty for breathing. Guilty for even thinking about being happy again. Sullivan, let me finish. He took her hands. Bringing you here, to this beach, where I made those promises to her. It's not about replacing her. It's not about forgetting. It's about honoring what we had while choosing to build something new with you. It's about me finally accepting that loving again isn't betrayal. It's survival. It's choosing life. Tears streamed down Naomi's face. Are you sure? I'm terrified, he admitted with a shaky laugh. I'm scared of losing you. Scared of opening my heart and having it destroyed again. Scared that I'm not enough, that I'll fail you, that I'll wake up one day and you'll realize you deserve better than a man still piecing himself together. He cupped her face gently. But I'm more scared of letting fear win. More scared of looking back in 20 years and regretting that I didn't fight for this. For us. Naomi kissed him then, right there on Folly Beach with the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and the waves singing around their feet. Kissed him like he was oxygen and she'd been holding her breath for 4 years. Kissed him like choosing love over fear was the bravest thing either of them had ever done. When they finally broke apart, both breathless and smiling, Sullivan rested his forehead against hers. Move in with me, he said. You and your mom. The penthouse has 4 bedrooms. She'd be close to the better dialysis center downtown. You could go back to school, finish that degree. We could figure out what our life looks like together instead of separately. No pressure, no timeline. Just together. Naomi's heart was racing. That's a big step. I know. And if you're not ready, we'll wait. We'll take as much time as you need. He pulled back to look at her. But I need you to know that I'm ready. Ready to share my space, my life, my future. Ready to build something permanent with you. Ready to stop being afraid. What about your grandmother? Naomi asked. We never resolved. She's been calling every day, Sullivan admitted. I've been answering. We're working on it. Slowly. But I understand now why she did what she did. And I'm grateful, actually. Because without her manipulation, I might never have let myself see you. Really see you. Naomi thought about the penthouse. About her mother finally getting the medical care she needed. About the scholarship she'd given up, and what it would mean to finish what she'd started. About waking up next to Sullivan every morning instead of just stolen moments. About what it would feel like to finally stop running and let herself be loved. Okay, she whispered. Yes. We'll move in. We'll try. We'll build something together. Sullivan's smile was like sunrise. Yeah. Yeah. She laughed through her tears. But I'm keeping my own bank account and paying rent and helping with bills because I'm not a charity case and we're partners. Not. He kissed her again, effectively shutting up her spiraling. Partners, he agreed when they came up for air. Equals. Building a life together. I wouldn't want it any other way. They stayed on that beach until the stars came out, talking about logistics and dreams and the future they were brave enough to build. And when Sullivan drove her home to tell her mother the news, Naomi felt lighter than she had in 4 years. Felt like maybe, possibly, she was allowed to hope. Allowed to dream. Allowed to love and be loved in return, imperfectly and beautifully and exactly right. The penthouse smelled like Sunday dinner. Naomi stood in the massive kitchen. Her kitchen now, though she still sometimes caught herself feeling like an imposter. Stirring her father's famous gumbo recipe while her mother directed operations from the breakfast bar. Brenda looked better than she had in years. The combination of consistent dialysis at the premier downtown center and reduced stress working miracles. More file powder, baby, Brenda instructed. Your daddy always said you can't skip the file. Yes, ma'am. Naomi added the spice, smiling at how natural this felt. How right. 2 months of living with Sullivan, and she still woke up some mornings convinced it was a dream. That she'd blink and find herself back in that cramped house in North Charleston, drowning in bills and exhaustion. But then Sullivan would roll over and pull her close, sleepy and warm, and she'd remember this was real. This was her life now. He's on the balcony with his father, Brenda said, nodding toward the floor-to-ceiling windows where Sullivan and Thomas stood talking, coffee cups in hand, overlooking Charleston's skyline. They look serious. They did. Naomi watched Sullivan's body language. Tense shoulders, that line between his brows that appeared when he was stressed. His father was talking, gesturing, clearly trying to convince him of something. Think Thomas is still trying to get him back to the company? Brenda asked. Probably. It was an ongoing thing, Thomas wanting Sullivan to return to Reynolds' development, Sullivan insisting he was done with that life. But Sullivan's happy in the gardens. He's been working with that landscape architecture firm downtown, doing consultations. He's good at it, Ma. Really good. And you're about to be just as good. Brenda's smile was proud. My daughter, back in school. Your daddy would be so happy, baby. Naomi's throat tightened. She'd started classes last month, returning to the landscape architecture program with a renewed scholarship and Sullivan's unwavering support. It was terrifying and exhilarating and exactly what she'd dreamed of 4 years ago before life had other plans. I miss him, Naomi admitted quietly. Daddy. Wish he could see all this. Meet Sullivan. Know that we're okay. He knows, baby. I promise you, he knows. Brenda reached over and squeezed her hand. And he'd approve of that man out there. Your Sullivan is good people. Your Sullivan. 2 months, and Naomi still got butterflies when people called him hers. The door from the balcony slid open, and Sullivan came in looking troubled. Thomas followed, shaking his head with what looked like resignation. Everything okay? Naomi asked. Fine. Sullivan kissed her temple, a gesture so natural now it made her heart squeeze. Dad's just being dad. I'm being realistic, Thomas corrected, but there was affection in his voice. The company needs you, son. Your business instincts, your vision. I have a vision, Sullivan interrupted gently. It just involves gardens and green spaces instead of concrete and development. You could do both, Thomas pressed. Come back part-time. Consult. Help us pivot towards sustainable development. You know the company's future has to include environmental considerations. Thomas, Brenda cut in, her voice kind but firm. The man said no. Maybe trust that he knows what he needs. Sullivan shot Brenda a grateful look. She'd become his unexpected ally these past 2 months, the mother figure who defended his choices when his own parents couldn't understand them. Thomas sighed but smiled. You're right, Brenda. As usual. He turned to Sullivan. But the offer stands. When you're ready. If you're ever ready. I appreciate it, Dad. Really. Sullivan's hand found Naomi's, and she laced their fingers together automatically. But I'm exactly where I need to be. After Thomas left, Naomi pulled Sullivan into their bedroom, their private space in this massive penthouse that was slowly becoming home. Talk to me, she said, sitting on the bed they'd picked out together last month. What's really going on? Sullivan was quiet for a long moment, standing by the window that overlooked the city. When he finally spoke, his voice was careful. Dad wants me to take over the company. Officially. He's ready to retire, and he wants Reynolds Development to stay in the family. He turned to face her. It's a lot of pressure. A lot of responsibility. The kind of life I walked away from 3 years ago. Do you want it? Naomi asked. That's the only question that matters. I don't know. He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. Part of me wants to prove I can do it. Show him, show everyone, that I'm not broken. That I can handle the pressure and the expectations and carrying on the family legacy. And the other part knows that going back to that life is what broke me in the first place. He sat beside her, taking her hands. Before Claire died, I was drowning in work. 80-hour weeks. Constant stress. I told myself it was building our future, but really I was just performing. Being who everyone expected me to be instead of who I actually was. Who are you? Naomi asked softly. I'm still figuring that out. His smile was sad. But I know I'm happier working with plants than portfolios. Happier creating beauty than building empires. Happier here, with you, than I ever was in a boardroom. Then that's your answer. But what if I'm being selfish? Sullivan's voice cracked slightly. What if I'm letting my family down? What if you spend the rest of your life doing what everyone else wants and wake up at 60 realizing you never lived for yourself? Naomi squeezed his hands. Sullivan, you survived losing Claire. You survived grief that should have destroyed you. You earned the right to choose your own path, even if it disappoints people. He's my father. And he loves you. Naomi cupped his face, making him look at her. Real love means wanting you to be happy, not wanting you to be what they need. If your father can't see that, that's his issue, not yours. Sullivan pulled her close, burying his face in her neck. How did you get so wise? 4 years of drowning taught me what matters. She held him tight. And what matters is that you're alive, Sullivan. Really alive. Not just surviving, not just going through motions, but actually living. Don't give that up for anyone. Not even for family. They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other while the weight of expectations and the freedom of choice battled it out between them. Finally, Sullivan pulled back, and his eyes were clear. "I'm not taking the company," he said firmly. "I'll help Dad find someone else to lead it. Someone who actually wants it. But I'm staying right here. In the gardens. In this life. With you." "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." Naomi kissed him, soft and deep and full of promise. And when they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. "Now," Sullivan said, standing and pulling her up with him, "let's go save that gumbo before your mother comes in here and yells at us for abandoning it." "She would totally do that," Naomi laughed. "I know. That woman terrifies me." But his smile said he loved her mother just as much as Naomi did. They walked back to the kitchen hand in hand, and Naomi felt it again, that sense of rightness. Of home. Of exactly where she was supposed to be. Life wasn't perfect. Her mother still needed dialysis 3 times a week. Money was still sometimes tight despite Sullivan's wealth, because Naomi insisted on contributing. School was challenging, balancing coursework with part-time work at the landscape firm where Sullivan consulted. But it was their life. Imperfect and complicated and beautiful. And for the first time since her father died, Naomi Baptiste felt like she could breathe. Really, truly breathe. The first crack appeared on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Naomi was in the kitchen studying for finals, coffee going cold beside her laptop, when her phone rang. Brenda's dialysis center. Her stomach dropped even before she answered. "Ms. Baptiste? Your mother didn't show up for her appointment this morning. We've tried calling her directly, but..." Naomi was already grabbing her keys, heart pounding. "I'm on my way." She found her mother in the penthouse bedroom, curled on her side, face gray with pain. "Ma." Naomi's voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me you weren't feeling well? Why didn't you wake me? Didn't want to worry you." Brenda's voice was thread thin. "You have finals. Important." "I'm fine, just tired." "You're not fine." Naomi was already pulling out her phone, dialing 911 with shaking hands. "You're going to the hospital. Now." Sullivan burst through the door, still in his running clothes from his morning jog. "What's wrong?" "Mom missed dialysis. She's..." Naomi's voice broke. "She's not okay." Sullivan didn't ask questions, just moved. Called the ambulance. Helped Brenda into a sitting position. Held Naomi when her legs gave out and terror swallowed her whole. "She can't." Naomi couldn't finish the sentence. Couldn't say the words that had haunted her for 4 years. "Sullivan, she can't. She won't," he said fiercely, pulling her close. "We're not losing her. Not today. Not like this." But even as he said it, Naomi saw the fear in his eyes. The same fear that had lived there 3 years ago, when Claire died and he learned that sometimes love wasn't enough. Acute kidney failure. The nephrologist, Dr. Washington, young and kind-eyed, delivered the news like an apology. "Her kidneys are functioning at about 15%. We need to discuss immediate dialysis and long-term options." Long-term options. Naomi heard herself ask from very far away. "Kidney transplant. It's the only real solution at this stage." Dr. Washington's expression was gentle but honest. "Without it, she'll need dialysis 3 times a week indefinitely. Her quality of life will decline. And even with dialysis, her prognosis isn't." She paused. "We need to get her on the transplant list immediately." The words washed over Naomi like cold water. Transplant list. Waiting. Hoping. Watching her mother deteriorate while they prayed for someone else to die so Brenda could live. "What about living donors?" Sullivan asked, his hand tight around Naomi's. "Possible, if we can find a match. But testing takes time, and there's no guarantee." "Test me," Sullivan said immediately. "Sullivan." Naomi started. "Test me," he repeated, looking at Dr. Washington. "Whatever you need. Blood work, tissue typing, whatever. Test me now." Dr. Washington nodded slowly. We can start the preliminary screening. But I should warn you, the odds of you being a compatible match, don't care about the odds. Sullivan's jaw was set. Just test me. After the doctor left, Naomi finally let herself fall apart. You don't have to do this, she sobbed against his chest. You don't have to. Yes, I do. He held her like she might shatter. Naomi, your mother is my family now. You're my family. If there's even a chance I can help, I'm taking it. What if you're not a match? Then we'll find someone who is. His voice was steel wrapped in velvet. We'll test everyone. Your friends, my family, strangers off the street if we have to. But we're not giving up. Not on her. Not ever. Naomi wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love and determination and Sullivan's unflinching support would be enough. But she'd learned the hard way that sometimes the universe didn't care how much you loved someone. Sometimes people died anyway. Sullivan wasn't a match. Wrong blood type. The preliminary screening didn't even make it past the first stage. Naomi took the news like a physical blow, even though she'd been preparing herself for it. Sullivan held her while she cried, his own face carved from stone, and she could feel his helplessness radiating like heat. We'll keep looking, he said, but his voice was hollow. They tested Naomi next. Also not a match, incompatible tissue markers. Eleanor volunteered, despite being 87. Too old, the doctors said gently. Thomas and his wife tested. Neither compatible. One by one, everyone in their circle tried and failed. And Brenda got weaker. Naomi watched her mother fade in increments. First the energy, then the appetite, then the light in her eyes. Dialysis kept her alive, but barely. Every session left her more exhausted, more gray, more distant. School became impossible. Naomi dropped her classes, the scholarship suspended indefinitely. She couldn't focus on landscape architecture when her mother was dying by degrees in a hospital bed. You should go back, Brenda insisted one evening, her hand papery thin in Naomi's. Baby, don't put your life on hold for me again. Ma, I mean it. Brenda's voice was fierce despite her weakness. You worked too hard to get back to school. Don't throw it away. I'm not throwing anything away, Naomi said, but the lie tasted bitter. I'm just postponing. Again. The word hung in the air between them. Postponing. The same word she'd used 4 years ago, when her father died and her mother got sick and all her dreams got folded into a drawer with eviction notices and medical bills. Some postponements became permanent. Some dreams expired while you weren't looking. Sullivan found Naomi on the penthouse balcony at 2 a.m., staring at Charleston's lights through tears she wouldn't let fall. Can't sleep? He asked quietly, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. Can't stop thinking. She leaned into him, exhausted. About my daddy. About how fast it happened with him. One day he was fine, singing in the garden, and the next day he was gone. Heart attack. No warning. No time to prepare. Her voice cracked. At least with Ma, we have time. Except that might be worse. Watching her fade slowly, knowing it's coming, being helpless to stop it. Sullivan was silent, and when Naomi looked up at him, she saw tears on his cheeks. Claire died instantly, he said. One moment we were driving home from dinner, laughing about something stupid, and the next moment there was glass and screaming and blood. She was gone before the ambulance arrived. I didn't get to say goodbye. Didn't get to tell her I loved her one more time. Didn't get to. His breath hitched. Sometimes I think having time would have been better. But watching your mom now, I don't know. Maybe both ways are just different kinds of torture. Naomi pulled him close, and they held each other while the city slept below them. Two people who'd learned too young that love wasn't armor against loss. Two people trying to be strong for each other while falling apart inside. I'm scared, Naomi whispered. I'm so scared, Sullivan. What if we can't find a donor? What if she dies waiting? What if I lose her the same way I lost Daddy, and I'm left with nothing but, you'll have me. Sullivan's voice was rough with emotion. You'll always have me, Naomi. No matter what happens. No matter how hard it gets. I'm not going anywhere. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that he meant it, that he wouldn't break under the weight of her grief if, when, her mother died. But a small voice in her head whispered, he said the same thing before. And then he left when things got hard. The thought was unfair. Cruel, even. Sullivan had more than proven himself these past 6 months. But fear didn't care about fairness. Fear just whispered poison and waited for you to believe it. The breaking point came on a cold December morning. Naomi was sitting in her mother's hospital room, watching Brenda sleep fitfully, when her phone buzzed. A text from the scholarship office. Due to extended absence, your scholarship has been revoked. Please contact the office to discuss reapplication for next academic year. Next year. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. Next year, when her mother might be gone. Next year, when she'd be starting over again, trying to piece together dreams from the wreckage. Next year, when she'd be 35 years old and exhausted and so tired of postponing her life. She didn't realize she was crying until Sullivan appeared in the doorway, coffee in hand, and his face went pale. Naomi. He crossed to her immediately. What happened? She showed him the text, unable to speak. Sullivan read it, and something flickered across his face. Anger, frustration, helplessness. All the things she felt churning in her own chest. We'll fix this, he said. I'll call the school, explain the situation, arrange private funding if I have to. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. Naomi. I said no, Sullivan. She stood, pacing the small room like a caged animal. I don't want your money fixing my problems. I don't want to be the charity case you're rescuing. I don't want. You're not a charity case, he interrupted, his voice rising. You're the woman I love and I'm trying to help. By throwing money at everything? Naomi's control finally snapped. By solving all my problems with your massive bank account? That's not help, Sullivan. That's just making yourself feel useful. The words hung in the air like a slap. Sullivan stepped back, and the hurt on his face made Naomi's stomach turn. That's not fair, he said quietly. None of this is fair. Naomi's voice cracked. My mother is dying. My scholarship is gone. My dreams keep getting deferred and deferred until they don't exist anymore. And you. She stopped herself before she said something unforgivable. I what? Sullivan's voice was dangerous now. I'm trying too hard? Caring too much? Being too present? Go ahead, Naomi. Finish the thought. You're trying to fix everything, and you can't. The truth exploded out of her. You can't fix my mom. You can't fix my scholarship. You can't fix the fact that I've spent 4 years drowning, and just when I thought I might finally surface, life dragged me back under. You can't fix any of it, Sullivan, so stop trying to be my savior and just what? Watch you drown. His hands were shaking. Let you suffer alone because accepting help makes you feel weak? Push me away because God forbid you actually need someone. That's not what it's exactly what you're doing. Sullivan's voice was raw now. You're terrified. You're grieving. And you're taking it out on me because I'm here and I'm safe and you know I won't leave. But you know what, Naomi? I'm drowning too. I'm watching your mother die, watching you break apart, feeling helpless and useless and scared that I'm going to lose both of you. And I'm trying. God, I'm trying so hard to be strong enough for both of us. But I can't do it if you keep pushing me away. Naomi opened her mouth to respond, but Sullivan wasn't done. I know what it's like to lose someone, he continued, and tears were streaming down his face now. I know what it's like to feel helpless while someone you love dies. And I'm terrified, Naomi. Terrified that your mother is going to die and you're going to blame me for not doing enough. Terrified that you're going to look at me the way I looked at myself after Claire died, like a failure who couldn't save the person who mattered most. The words broke something in Naomi's chest. Sullivan, she whispered, reaching for him. But he stepped back, and the distance between them felt like a canyon. I need some air, he said. I need to. I can't be here right now. Then he was gone, and Naomi was alone with her sleeping mother and the wreckage of everything she'd just said. And for the first time since they'd reconciled 6 months ago, she wondered if love really was enough, if they were strong enough to survive this, if she'd just destroyed the best thing in her life because she was too scared and too angry and too tired to hold on. Same day, evening, day 208, Sullivan didn't come back. Naomi sat in that hospital room for 8 hours, watching her mother sleep. And checking her phone every 5 minutes like a lifeline that wouldn't connect. No calls. No texts. Nothing. By 7 p.m., when visiting hours ended and the nurses gently suggested she go home, panic had settled into her bones like ice. She'd pushed him too far. Said unforgivable things. Accused him of the one thing he'd been terrified of, being seen as inadequate, as a failure, as someone trying to buy his way into being useful. And now he was gone. Just like she'd feared. Just like she'd known would happen eventually. Everyone left. That's what Sullivan had said that terrible morning when Eleanor revealed the truth. Everyone lies or leaves or dies. Naomi had just given him a reason to add her to that list. The penthouse was dark when she arrived. Empty. Silent except for the sound of her own ragged breathing. "Sullivan," she called out, knowing he wouldn't answer but needing to try anyway. Nothing. She checked their bedroom, bed untouched. His running shoes were gone from the closet. The keys to his car weren't on the hook by the door he'd left. Really left, and Naomi had no one to blame but herself. She sank onto the couch, the one they'd picked out together 3 months ago, laughing about throw pillows and arguing playfully about colors, and finally let herself break. Not the quiet crying she'd been doing for weeks. The real thing. The kind that came from somewhere deep and primal and made her whole body shake. She cried for her mother, dying in a hospital bed. For her father, 4 years gone but still missed every single day. For the scholarship she'd lost twice now. For the dreams that kept getting deferred until they disappeared. For Sullivan, who'd loved her despite all her sharp edges and fears, and who she'd driven away because she was too broken to accept love without sabotaging it. She cried until she couldn't breathe, until her throat was raw, until she had nothing left. And then she pulled out her phone and did the one thing she'd sworn she'd never do. She called Eleanor to Eleanor's house. Late day 208. Sullivan Reynolds answered the door in a silk robe, leaning heavily on her cane, and took one look at Naomi's face. Before pulling her inside. "He's not here," Eleanor said immediately. "But I know where he is." "I messed up," Naomi said, and her voice was hoarse from crying. "I said terrible things. I pushed him away. You're terrified and grieving and you lashed out at the person you love most because he's safe and present and you knew he wouldn't abandon you." Eleanor guided Naomi to the sunroom, the same room where she'd first suggested the deception that started everything. "Except now you're terrified you were wrong about that last part." "What if I was?" Naomi whispered. "What if I finally pushed him too far?" Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the garden where Sullivan had first told Naomi about Claire, where they'd shared coffee and confessions and fallen in love despite every reason not to. "My grandson has been abandoned by life too many times," Eleanor said finally. "His wife died. His sense of purpose died. He spent 3 years convinced he didn't deserve happiness because he'd survived when Claire didn't." She turned to face Naomi, and her eyes were fierce despite her age. "Then you came along. You, this exhausted, brilliant, stubborn woman who made him remember what it felt like to be alive. And he fought for you, Naomi. Came back after walking away. Opened his heart despite being terrified. Took every risk love requires." "I know," Naomi said, tears streaming again. "I know, and I threw it back in his face because I was scared and angry and human," Eleanor interrupted gently. "Making mistakes doesn't make you unworthy of love, dear girl. It makes you real. The question is whether you're brave enough to fight for him the way he fought for you." Naomi looked up. "Where is he?" "The garden. Where he always goes when the weight gets too heavy to carry inside." Eleanor squeezed Naomi's hand. "Go to him. Tell him the truth. All of it. The fear, the grief, the terror that you're going to lose everyone you love. Stop protecting yourself and let him see the mess. Let him love you anyway. What if he can't? Then you'll survive, Eleanor said firmly. Just like you survived your father's death and your ex leaving and 4 years of drowning alone. You'll survive, Naomi. But I don't think you'll have to. Because that boy loves you with everything he has. And love like that doesn't quit just because things get hard. The garden at Eleanor's house, night, day 208. Naomi found Sullivan exactly where Eleanor said he'd be. In the south garden bed, the one with the David Austin roses, digging in the dirt by moonlight like he could bury his pain in the earth. He didn't look up when she approached, but his hands stilled on the shovel. "I'm sorry," Naomi said into the darkness. "I'm so sorry, Sullivan. For what I said. For pushing you away. For making you feel like your help wasn't wanted when the truth is I don't know how to survive any of this without you." "I can't fix it," Sullivan said, and his voice was hollow. "I can't fix your mother. Can't bring back your scholarship. Can't make any of this hurt less. And watching you suffer while being completely useless is killing me, Naomi. It's bringing back every helpless feeling I had when Claire died, and I don't." His voice cracked. "I don't know how to help you when you won't let me in." "I'm scared," Naomi admitted, moving closer. "I'm terrified that if I let myself depend on you, you'll leave. That if I let myself believe in us completely, life will rip it away like it's ripped away everything else I've loved. So I keep one foot out the door, keep pushing you away before you can leave first, keep sabotaging us because at least that way I'm in control of when it ends." Sullivan finally looked at her, and even in the moonlight she could see the pain in his eyes. "I left once," he said quietly. 6 months ago, when I found out about the deception. I walked away instead of fighting through it, and it was the worst mistake of my life. But I came back, Naomi. I came back and I've shown up every single day since. I've proven that I'm not going anywhere. So when do you start believing me?" "Now," Naomi whispered, dropping to her knees beside him in the dirt. "I believe you now. I'm sorry it took me so long. I'm sorry I'm so broken that I keep testing you to see if you'll fail. I'm sorry I can't just accept love without question the way I should." "You're not broken." Sullivan's hands found her face, gentle despite everything. "You're scared. There's a difference." "I don't want to lose you," Naomi said, and the words were ripped from somewhere deep. "I don't want to lose my mom. I don't want to lose this life we've built. But I feel like it's all slipping through my fingers anyway, and I don't know how to hold on." "Then let me hold on for both of us." Sullivan pulled her close, and she collapsed against him, both of them kneeling in the dirt where this all started. "Let me be strong when you can't. Let me catch you when you fall. Let me love you through the mess, Naomi, because that's what love is. Not perfection. Not having all the answers. Just showing up and choosing each other even when, especially when, it's hard." "What if my mom dies?" The question she'd been afraid to ask finally escaped. "What if we can't find a donor and she dies and I fall apart completely? What if I become someone you can't love anymore?" "Then I'll love the broken version," Sullivan said fiercely. "I'll love the grieving version. I'll love the angry version and the scared version and every version you become, because I don't love you conditionally, Naomi. I love you. Period. End of story. No matter what." And finally, Naomi let herself believe it. Let herself sink into his arms and accept that maybe, possibly, she'd found someone who wouldn't run when things got impossibly hard. Someone who'd dig in the dirt at midnight waiting for her to come find him. Someone who loved her enough to fight for them even when she was too scared to fight for herself. They stayed in that garden until dawn started painting the sky pink and gold, holding each other while the roses bloomed around them. Not talking. Not planning. Just being present in the wreckage and trusting that together, somehow, they'd find their way through. When they finally stood, dirt-stained and exhausted and more in love than ever, Sullivan took her hand. "Whatever happens with your mom," he said quietly, "we face it together. No more pushing me away. No more trying to protect me from your pain. We're in this. All of it. Together." "Together," Naomi agreed, and for the first time in weeks, she felt like she could breathe. They drove back to the hospital as the sun rose, ready to face whatever came next. Ready to keep fighting. Ready to prove that love, messy, imperfect, hard-won love, really could be enough.